Hello everyone, my name is Dylan Abernathy. I'm sure a lot of you here on YouTube also know me as Tie-Dye, and I'm a senior environment artist working in the games industry, and this video here has been a long time coming. I've had this channel for a while now. I made it back in 2009, and since then it's gone under some pretty big changes. I started just posting random videos with friends and got into gameplay commentary videos and montages after that, and I've now solidified it as a platform for 3D art. So since I've had this channel for such a long time, I've uploaded content from when I was in high school, not really knowing what I wanted to do, then being in college, working towards game art, and now finally as someone in the industry. Along the way, when I was in college, I explored my experience going to school for game art and started a mini series there, but I never actually made a final part after I graduated sharing my final thoughts. I think there was just a lot to digest, but now that I've been in the industry for a few years now and have experience across several studios, I wanted to return to the topic and share my final thoughts on the experience and finally wrap up this series. So there's a lot to go over, and this video has been on the back of my mind for quite a long time now, so as per tradition, let's go ahead and put up some gameplay and get this discussion going. Alright, I've recorded this a few times now. I keep ending up going back and changing the script, changing things around, and I'm trying to make it feel a bit more natural. I have like 13 pages of notes that I want to get through here. So I'm trying to take things out and make it seem a little bit more natural and make the flow a bit better, so bear with me here. But before diving into any of my actual thoughts and opinions, I just kind of wanted to lay down some ground rules. So the first thing I want to mention is that I'm not really going to bring up any specifics, so studios or schools that I went to or anything like that. In the previous videos, I had a lot of people asking, like, which school did you go to? Like, this program sounds good, or I don't like how this program sounds. Like, they just wanted to know this stuff. I'm not going to go into that. I'm not really here to promote anything specific or put anything down. That's really not what I'm trying to do here. The next thing is that neither myself or anyone talking about this stuff will have all of the answers. So please go into this just sort of expecting some general advice. You know, all I'm really trying to do is give basic advice so that you can go after this and ask the right questions. In fact, I'll provide a list at the end of this video that'll sort of help you guide yourself to the next steps. And that's because, of course, everything I'm going to say here is very biased. You know, people might be in my situation and love it. People might have gone through the same things I did and hate it. So I'm trying to just sort of put this out there. You cannot just apply everything I'm saying and get the same sort of results or better results or worse results or like it or dislike it. Like, this has to be very loose, and this has to be just very, very basic information that you can then apply to your situation. That's more or less what I wanted to lay out at the beginning here. That said, let's go ahead and dive into what my personal situation was. It's a pretty good place to start. So before going to college, I decided I wanted to go because I enjoyed a lot of 3D work. I was already doing 3D work. I was doing a lot of stuff with YouTube, so I had already been making YouTube banners in Cinema 4D and sort of low poly art and 3D intros for channels, and I was selling that stuff on the side, and I was pretty comfortable learning how to do this stuff on my own and was getting some results out of it. So this gave me a bit of a head start. I understood the basics. I knew, like I said, self-learning. And it was something that I really enjoyed doing. So when I was looking for what I wanted to do after high school, I found a college a few hours away that I was able to move to. I knew that some of the grads there had been doing some pretty impressive stuff, and they ended up getting some jobs. The course was a 3-year program, and it covered pretty much all the standard game art topics that you could think of. So things like environment art, modeling, texturing, cinematography, concept art, animation, and quite a bit more. So it was a pretty packed course. So this is a pretty normal format. A lot are more specialized. Like, you could just go to just an animation course. You could go to just a modeling course or something like that. And there's pros and cons to each. Ideally, I think if you really know what you want to do, the more specialized, probably the better in this industry. That's a whole other debate. Like, indies would probably want you to be more well-rounded, but as soon as you start going to AA and AAA, being specialized is a lot better, but getting a general knowledge in everything is still pretty good. And another important thing to note for my situation specifically was I was pretty fortunate. My parents were able to cover my tuition. I was very lucky to be in that situation. The deal that we had was they would cover my tuition and I would just pay for my week-to-week expenses. So food, bills, stuff like that. And what that meant for me was that as long as I worked for the 4 months over the summer, you know, I had maybe 5 shifts a week or something like that, and I was smart with my money, I could just stash up a bunch of money over the summer, sort of divide it up week by week, and I'd be pretty good until the next summer. So I never had a ton of savings, but it was a pretty comfortable amount. And that pretty much was good because not only did it save me a lot of money, but it saved me time, which I came to learn is pretty much the most important thing you can have when going to school. So since I had the support, I tried pretty much as best as I could in all of my subjects, and I ended up actually graduating from my program at the top of my class. Now, I hesitated to add this in because I'm not trying to say this as a bragging point, but mostly to outline how important it was that I had that prior 3D knowledge that I mentioned before, and all of this extra time. So there were some other students in my class who didn't really have that sort of fortunate position. They had to work after hours and stuff like that, and it does make a difference. It does make it more difficult. I'll get into that a little bit more later, but it just means you'll have to be smarter with your time. So that's kind of two things that really helped me out and two things I wanted to highlight, and it's part of the reason I was able to find some success through the program I was in. On that note though, grades really don't matter. Like, employers do not care about anything but your portfolio and the experience you have. The only thing grades are really good for is giving you kind of a loose indicator that you're heading in the right direction. So just something to keep in mind. I'm going to go into it a little bit more, like I said. So I've known people who have dropped out of college who are working in the industry. Like, college didn't really suit them and they turned out pretty good. And on the other hand, most graduates who do graduate don't really end up working in the industry. So you got to think about it like grades don't really matter. This is just sort of like an institution for you to develop your skills. So the big takeaway from my experience, like I said, is that I was just lucky to have this prior knowledge and this extra time. And if you're thinking of going to school for this, you should already be using all the free resources out there. Like, get that head start. Like, don't front load yourself with a bunch of work. If you can go into it already knowing the basics of modeling and UVing and environment art and all that, do yourself a favor and do that. There's no reason not to with all the information. And also, as far as time goes, like I said, you're going to have to be smart with that. For me, I sort of had extra time to waste, but I still sort of crammed it all into my academics. But if you don't have that extra time, you're just going to have to sort of find what's valuable to you and really invest the extra time into those areas, and it's still all going to turn out okay. Most people had to end up doing that, and many of the people I graduated in those situations, it ended up working out pretty good for them. So let's go over to my overall experience. Did I enjoy my experience? I would say, looking back on it, yes. But did I think that the price was worth it and the best way to learn this stuff? I think that's a lot harder to say. First off, you don't really need to go to school for this field. Like I said, grades don't really mean anything. It's all just portfolio. But on the other hand, doing things like moving away, I think was a really good choice for me. It helped me develop my soft skills, things like being responsible with time and money and meeting new people, traveling. These are all things that came with the college experience. And I think they really helped me grow more into becoming a proper adult. And for those reasons, I would say that this whole experience for me was worth it. Now, with that in mind, the education side of things, I would say is a little bit of a different story. So traditional schools, I just don't think that sort of system that colleges and universities have matches what we're doing here very well. I still learned lots. Like, I tried many new things that I wouldn't have tried otherwise, and that's probably the largest praise I can give colleges and universities and formal programs for this stuff. A lot of people say they go into them not really knowing what it is that they want to do, and they try a whole bunch of things. They get their hands in animation and concept art and shaders and stuff that they didn't even know existed, and they find what they really like doing. So even if you don't sort of want to do that and you think you know what you want to do, sort of having those extra skills and exposing yourself to everything is still really good. Like, I got a lot out of that, and that's probably the biggest highlight of the college experience. But there are some drawbacks. So why do I say this style of teaching doesn't necessarily work? There's a few reasons. The main is that eventually, even if you're exposed to all this stuff, you're going to find what it is that you want to do and you really care about it, but you're not going to really be able to focus on it because your courses are so bloated. Like, for me, I found that I really liked environment art and modeling, but that doesn't matter because I have animation, concept art, like all these other courses that are taking away my time from the thing I actually care about. And that's going to be a bit of an issue, especially as you're building your portfolio and getting into your later years. This is something, like I said, I didn't really deal with too well. Like, I tried too hard in every single area and ended up getting a bit burnt out near the end, which wasn't really good, especially as you're trying to find a job, obviously. And at some point, you're just going to have to learn to just kind of cut off the things that you don't really care about. So for me, in final year, like, if I know I do not want to do animation and I think I have a basic understanding of animation, there's just no reason to be doing 8 hours of animation assignments every single week. So you're just gonna have to learn when to cut things off, when you think your knowledge is good and when you think you want to go in a certain direction. Because like I said, most studios at this point are going to want you to be a little bit more specialized. So get the knowledge that you can, but start to focus in a little bit more. And that's probably the best way to deal with the time issue. So anyways, how busy you are will change from school to school, but the other drawback is probably something everyone will have to deal with, and this is where I think the biggest fault comes in with this kind of teaching method, and that is that a lot of what you want to know is time-gated. So I remember wanting to learn Substance Designer in my first year of college, but we weren't really planning to do that until year 2. So what I ended up doing, just because I was curious and I wanted to know, was I went on the Algorithmic YouTube channel, the people who owned Substance at the time. You know, I followed a lot of their tutorials. I got the basics. I learned all this stuff. But then it came around to second year and we ended up doing like a lot of intro classes, a lot of intro projects, and I still had to go to those classes. I still had to do those projects. But to me at that point, compared to what was just available online and what I learned, it was just so basic and it just felt like a waste of time. So I think that's where the fundamental issue is you can just go out there and learn whatever you want for free. If you're purely seeking information and you just want to be as efficient as possible, to me, I don't think there's any reason you should go to college. There's just way too many good resources out there. There's free game engines like Unreal, Unity. If you want to learn modeling, there's Blender, there's YouTube videos, Discord communities where you can go talk to professionals, you know, ArtStation Learning, all that kind of stuff. And even then, even if you're in college, like it still makes sense to look this stuff up way ahead of time. If you're just sort of going through everything beat by beat, it's like, why would you not want to learn these programs if you're interested in them rather than waiting an extra year or something like that? To counter this though, colleges do offer some cool things. They have community, they have professors who can answer specific questions. You know, the people that you're learning with and the people around you are really going to make the experience worth it. Like the people I went to school with, I still talk to a lot of them. A few times a week, we helped each other out. We're looking out for each other. If someone gets let go, you're trying to recommend them to your studio, stuff like that. So these connections you make in real life are going to be important. And if you have a good group of professors as well, they can really help you get your footing in the industry. So you can always find people online as well, and you definitely should be doing that. Online communities are great, but like I said, the people you meet in real life are going to be a little bit different. But when it comes to learning quickly and respecting your time, in my experience, just traditional schools is just not really the way to go about it when it comes to this topic, if it's just information you're seeking. So one good example to highlight this is I have a peer who went from zero 3D experience to working on a AAA game as an outsourcer in just about 6 months. This was possible because they knew what they wanted to do, they were hyper-focused on it, and had really good connections. Now I have to recognize that this is like a 1 in a million or 1 in 1,000 chance, but I just wanted to point out that it can be done. They did have a lot of time to dedicate to this, but I just wanted to highlight that a lot of people who went to my program and finished school and went through 3 years probably had less experience than this person who just sort of crammed and did it in a few months. And I can also see this sort of stuff highlighted when my girlfriend also last year self-taught herself 3D in a matter of months. And she's pretty much on par with a lot of the people that I graduated with as well, just sort of learning stuff online, using resources, asking the right questions, being proactive. The one skill you really need for this stuff is self-drive, whether you're in school or not. So even if you go to school, you need to learn as much as you can between the lessons to get ahead. You need to be involved in communities. You need to be pushing yourself further and further. Going to school does not get you a job by any means. All it's really doing is buying you time to get the skills to get a job. Graduating, actually, in a lot of these courses is pretty easy. Most of the people who graduate, though, don't get jobs. It's always the people who are doing more, going outside of the course, and always trying to develop themselves more and more. So speaking of getting a job from a studio point of view, which school you went to, or if you even went to a school, really doesn't matter at all. I've actually had the privilege of being on the hiring side from within 2 studios and looking at people's portfolios and all that kind of stuff. And I gotta tell you, we only really care about their portfolio quality and if they can work on a team or not. Are they a team player? This doesn't really mean there are some advantages to going to school. For example, if someone went to the same school as me or in my area or a prestigious school, basically any sort of link that school can give me from me to them and give me a connection, it's gonna pique my interest. I'm gonna wanna know a little bit more about them, especially if I've heard things about that program. Another advantage of that is that schools show that you can work on a team pretty well. You know, colleges and universities, they often have some sort of team project. So for me, in my situation, one of the things that we ended up doing was having a sort of simulated studio environment where we all synced to a build. We would add assets and stuff and push it, and everybody would be able to download those, and we'd be working in one big Unreal file, which was great. That's exactly how you work inside of a studio. And prior to my first job, I didn't have this experience anywhere else other than this project I had at school. So that was really good. It was very eye-opening, and I think when you explain that stuff to studios, they really like that. That said, it's not really exclusive to college. You know, many communities set up similar things. It's not difficult to do this if you can find the right group of people, but it's still something nice to have under your belt, and it's almost guaranteed to come with a college or university program. That said, if you're still not thinking of going down that route, colleges are not really the only way to get that. Like, honestly, just basic work experience goes quite a long way. It's just something that people want to see. Can you hold a job? Can you work with other people? Whether that's game specific or something totally different, that doesn't really matter. But I just think people might be a little bit more favored to see something related to games, right? It's just a way to get your foot in the door and start talking the lingo of studios if you ever get an interview. Now, to this point, I've mostly spoken from my experience, and that's going to vary quite a bit from school to school. So some programs are taught exclusively by people working in the industry, and they give you great feedback. You get great connections, amazing students around you that are always pushing you further and further. And others, and there's quite a lot of these, are just taught by people completely out of the loop with outdated information. They don't really know what they're talking about, no connections to studios whatsoever. But most studios, or most colleges rather, are somewhere in the middle, with just some experience, some good professors, you know, some loose connections, something like that. So if you're looking for a school, what are some things that you should be looking for, and what does it even mean for a school to necessarily be good? Well, you should go into it with the expectation of still learning most of your knowledge outside of the classroom. So what I would describe to be a good school would be an environment that teaches you practical skills and encourages you to self-learn. Like, you should be doing a lot of the stuff outside of the classroom, as I said before. They should supply you with a really good community, and you definitely need professors who are either in the industry or have connections to the industry. To find this stuff out, definitely look up your professors on LinkedIn. Like, where were they working previously? Have they worked in the industry before? Do they know people who are in the industry? If not, what are they really offering you in this field that is changing so incredibly fast? Probably not a whole lot. You can also look up graduates from the program. This is something I really recommend. So are they working? If you can find some of them, definitely email them, reach out to them. What was their experience? They're definitely gonna not hold back and let you know what they truly think about things, which is super valuable. And then another important thing is, what is the graduation to employment rate? Like I said, a lot of people graduate from these programs and don't necessarily get jobs. So compare a few schools in your area or a few options and see which ones have the highest employment rate. That'll definitely speak volumes as well to the situation. You can also look at things like, does the school have any connections to studios in the area? So for me, that was one of the biggest things that I had to my advantage. We had a big AAA studio not too far away from where I was, and they would hold a student competition every single year where they'd give us a prompt and we'd go and make an environment for it. And if you won, you'd get a paid internship at that studio, which usually turned into a job. But even if you lost, sometimes they would invite you down to the studio. And even if you didn't get that far, at the very least, you could sort of compare all of your work to the people around you. And I remember the first time I entered, I was so confident, but I just got blown out of the water completely. It was a very eye-opening experience to see what everyone in my area was capable of doing, because I kind of felt pretty comfortable in my little bubble at my college and in my program. But as soon as you start seeing who else is out there in the area and you start to realize your actual competition for getting a job, it definitely made me a lot more motivated to continue working harder and get better. But eventually, because we had a studio nearby in this competition, it led me to getting my foot in the door and getting my first job. So that's something else to consider. Are there studios around in your area? So for all these reasons, you can kind of see why it's so hard to recommend going to school or not going to school. The experience I had was great, but it was mostly due to the soft skills, which is kind of hard to argue is worth the price of admission when tuition is so high. Basically all comes down to where you're at in life and what you're looking for. So regardless of if you want to go to college for game art or not, you should be practicing, learning well before anyways. With free resources, there's no reason not to, and that can get you pretty far. Like I said, a lot of people get jobs just doing the self-learning. If you do know exactly the area of game art that you want to do and you want your money and your time to go a lot further, you know, online resources like mentorships would probably be the way to go instead of college. And if you still want to figure things out and you're not quite sure what to do, like I said, these programs really help you out with understanding all the options out there and guiding you a little bit more into what you want to do. So I would compare them by saying college will expose you to everything you need, but you'll ultimately spend less time doing what you want once you find what that is. It'll provide you with connections, a learning environment, and lots of time to figure out what you want at the cost of a very expensive tuition. Little focused learning and a ton of your free time compensating for kind of the failures of the traditional learning system. You're going to be doing a lot of double takes on stuff, trying to get ahead, projects you don't care about, like I said. Self-learning, on the other hand, is much faster. If you already know what you want, it's a lot cheaper, it's a lot more flexible at the cost of no direct guidance, lack of peers going through what you are, not really having a strong understanding of where you should be, and just no direct industry connections without being very proactive on your own. At the end of the day, like I said, both have pros and cons, and it just kind of comes down to what you want, but I don't really think one's better than the other. It's just a very situational sort of thing. Now, there is a bit of a curveball when it comes to international students, because there's this whole other area of visas and getting a work visa and having to get, a proper education to get that in certain countries. This area isn't something I know a ton about, but I just wanted to touch on. I had a few friends who had to do something like this. To me, it seems like a necessary evil, but once again, I think all these rules apply. Like, if you have to go to school, please try and find something that is with qualified professors, a good community. And these things can get expensive, so that's definitely something to keep in mind as well. But as far as international goes, it doesn't really seem like there's too big of a way around that unless you can really prove like your skills are top notch and get a job locally, which transfers into an international job. Another option you can do, though, in something I've seen pop up more and more, is many people who have gone to college for game art, they kind of recommend actually going to school for a different program. And I've heard of some people doing this as well, where since there's so many free resources online as it is, they go to college or university for something completely unrelated, and in their spare time, they learn how to do this stuff and build up their portfolio, make connections, do it as a hobby, and that eventually transitions into their actual job. Because like I said, having an education specifically in game art doesn't really matter all that much. So if there's something else you're interested in, you can still pursue that, do this on the side, and eventually merge back into game art at the end while still getting an education in something unrelated. So wrapping things up, that's more or less my thoughts on all of this. Like I said, I enjoyed my experience, but I found some areas I wasted my time pretty frustrating. The highlights of the experience will always be the community aspect of it. Working and learning with your friends was so much fun, so great, and I still hold a lot of those connections near and dear to me to this day. This is something that can't really be replaced online, so I'm really happy I got to experience it. The actual education for me was alright, but could have been heavily modernized and respected our time a lot more. This might be something unique to my experience, but for most people I've talked to, this seems pretty normal and can actually get a lot worse. Most schools for games are getting better at this, but since a lot of people want to work in games, a lot of programs can coast maybe a little bit more than they probably should. What I did find inexcusable, though, was sometimes having like 10 classes a semester, always being overworked, no free time. I was always sort of canceling hanging out with friends. I didn't really get that sort of traditional college experience. I still got to meet a lot of people. I got to do some things between classes, but there was just so much work. Like, if any of you have done 3D work before, you know that making a scene is not something you just sort of turn out very quickly. So when you have several of those all running at the same time, plus other projects from other classes, and imagine stacking work on top of that. It's just like, you just will not have time. This stuff is just way too busy. And it kind of sucked because I got to see some other classmates who, they had to work between their semesters, or they had to work after hours or something like that, or they had families and they started slipping behind because, there's just unrealistic expectations and there just wasn't time to deal with this stuff. So you'll have to be smart with your time. You'll have to make a few sacrifices, but it's definitely doable. And like I said, the earlier you can find out what you're interested in is probably the better. So for me, like I said, I think the experience was overall worth it, and I had a pretty good time with things. I'm trying to keep this a little bit lighter, but honestly, I am pretty critical of the entire experience. I would probably say that in my day-to-day job, most of the stuff that I do, I didn't learn directly from school, but the time that I spent learning stuff outside of the program, doing my own projects, signing up for optional contests and stuff like that, part-time work where I was doing some outsourcing stuff. Like, this is what really taught me, and most of my day-to-day stuff is knowledge that I got from that. School still exposed me to a lot of things, and I'm thankful for that, but the educational side of things I do have a lot of gripes with, and I do think there's a lot of room for improvement. If I was trying to redo this, I don't think I'd go back on my experience. I think it was really good and everything worked out pretty well. But if I was just going for the knowledge, I would probably go for mentorships, YouTube tutorials, ArtStation learning, that kind of stuff. It would be so much cheaper, so much more efficient. So that's more or less how I stand on all of this stuff. That said, like I said, I wanted to wrap this up with some questions to maybe ask yourself to better orient yourself moving forward with, should you go to school? Should you be self-taught? And maybe some ways to better guide yourself into those positions. So let's go over some of those questions. So, are you independent? Do you value structure? Do you have good colleges near you? What is the graduation to hiring rate? Are the professors working in the industry? Are there major studios nearby? Do you already know what you want to specialize in? Are you already able to learn 3D well outside of college? Can you even afford college at this time? Will you have enough time to dedicate to a strict schedule? What do the graduates say about the program? Is there another field you want to study and that you can take on game art on the side with? And do you need to get a visa in order to work in the place that you want to? So take some time to think about these questions and see what's most important to you, and hopefully this can help guide you a little bit into your next steps. Also, once again, look into other people's opinions, do some more digging outside this video. Like I said, this is super biased to my opinion. I'm sure you'll find someone with a complete opposite opinion, but I just wanted to share my thoughts. But yeah, so I think that will probably do for this. If you have any questions, please ask them in the comments. I keep adding to the script, like I said, and going over and over and combing through things and editing things. I think if I don't wrap things up here, I will never end this video. It's been on the back of my mind for such a long time. I just kind of want to get it out there. So thank you for listening. I'll try and be active in the comments, so ask some questions down there. But I think that'll do it for now. Thanks for listening. I hope this could be of some help. And once again, my name's been Dylan. Have a great day, everyone.